morning students, my name is Arpit and once again I am recording a video lecture for class 10th. Today we will study chapter 1, A Triumph of Surgery. This is your first chapter from the book entitled Footprints Without Feet, which is also known as Supplementary Reader. Chapter 1, A Triumph of Surgery was written by James Herriot, who is also the narrator of the story. James Herriot was a British veterinary surgeon and writer. Veterinary means animal doctor. He used his many years of experiences as a veterinary surgeon to write a series of books consisting of stories about animals and their owners. So now I will tell you the summary of this chapter in brief. The story of this chapter is about Mrs. Pumphrey and her dog named Tricky. So first heading is Tricky's illness. The narrator of the story, Mr. Herriot, means James Herriot. He is a veterinary surgeon. He was really worried about the dog. Its name was Tricky. He was shocked to see it with its mistress, the dog. Here mistress is Mrs. Pumphrey. Dog had become hugely fat. Its eyes had become red. Its tongue came out from the jaws. It was in a state of disease. Second point. Tricky's mistress made Tricky ill. The mistress of the dog was Mrs. Pumphrey. She told Mr. Herriot that the dog seemed to have no energy, no enthusiasm. So she gave it more malt and cod. Cod means fish. Cod liver oil, and a bowl of Horlicks. She also gave it some more cream cakes, chocolates, despite Herriot's refusal. Next heading. Herriot's warning to Mrs. Pumphrey. Herriot looked at the dog again, and its big trouble was that it had become greedy, very greedy. It did not refuse food. The dog used to eat a lot. Herriot asked Mrs. Pumphrey if she had been giving the dog penalty of exercise or physical tasks. She said that she had not. Herriot warned her. If she didn't cut its food and gave it more physical exercise for the dog became too lazy. Dog will become too lazy exactly because it is not doing any kind of physical exercise and he was eating a lot of food. Tricky to be in a hospital. This is our next heading. Within next few days, Mrs. Pumphrey told Herriot that Tricky didn't eat anything. It refused to eat even its favorite dishes. You can imagine the situation now. It spent all time lying panting. Panting means breathing heavily. The narrator had made his plans in advance. He suggested that Tricky should be hospitalized for about a fortnight. The lady almost became unconscious. She was not happy with this. Now Tricky's treatment. The narrator kept an eye on Tricky for 2 days. He gave it penalty of water but no food. On the third day, the dog started whimpering. Whimpering means crying slowly on seeing other dogs. It followed them down the garden. Later that day, other dogs had their food. When they had finished their food, Tricky walked around the bowls. He also licked them. He licked the bowls. It meant that he was hungry. So now next heading is when Tricky becomes alright. Mrs. Pumphrey started to bring round fresh eggs to build Tricky's strength. The narrator began giving Tricky wine. Tricky was given wine before and during the meal. The dog began to drink brandy also. Tricky now had 1 extra egg in the morning. So Tricky was gaining strength. Next heading is then Tricky came back to the house. How Tricky came back to the house of Mrs. Pumphrey. Finally, last heading, Tricky's cure, a triumph of surgery. The narrator helped the driver to bring out Tricky's various things. Now Tricky is back at home. Tricky is coming back. These were Tricky's beds, toys, cushions, coats and bowls, etc. They had not been used. As the car moved, so Mrs. Pumphrey went to the surgeon's place, narrator's place, veterinarian surgeon James Herriot's place, and now Mrs. Pamphret is bringing back the dog. So the dog is coming back, and Mrs. Pamphret is very happy about this. She is crying. She is very much emotional, and at the end, what happens is she looked out of the window and said it was actually a triumph of surgery. And this is the name of our chapter, A Triumph of Surgery.